Welcome back to the Vikings Team Hotel in London, PA and Wabi. Now happy to be joined by Minnesota Vikings General Manager Rick Spielman. Good afternoon, Mr. Spielman. Good morning in the Twin Cities. How are you?
Cheers.
Cheers. Are things going well for you?
Yeah, no, it's been great.
The practice you guys had today at those rugby fields, I noticed you were chatting with a Rick Spielman type luminary from a rugby team, franchise, squad. Am I accurate? Who was it, and what did you guys talk about?
That was the chairman of the London Irish.
Yeah.
So just sitting there chatting about their league, how they go about doing things, comparing them some things that we do in our league. On Wednesday, I had come out earlier, spent the day at Arsenal, and went out and visited with them on how they're doing sports science, how they operate their business on a daily basis. Got to tour the facility. So
Yeah.
it was a great opportunity to come out a little early and get to see some of the things that maybe we can implement when we go back, or share some of the things that we're doing they can potentially use.
Is kicking important in rugby? And why I ask is because your kicker just nailed 6 field goals. So I thought he was like feeling you out to see how he can get Kai Forbath here in the offseason.
Yeah, no, they kick it pretty good. We were watching them the other day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they have a pretty good leg.
Ain't no doubt.
We had Luther join us earlier, just talking about the logistics and the operations and what that's like. For a GM, leader of a franchise, and one of the stewards of the league, and you want things to go well for the league, so you guys get together and you talk about the best ways to represent the NFL over here. But then there are also competitive advantage type things to how you travel and to the tips that a team is given. So how do you balance those two things, wanting what's best for the league but not wanting to give away some of the things that work for us?
Well, I think you always want to come over here and put your best foot forward, and we're going about it and doing our business the exact same way we would do it on a normal road trip. So from that standpoint, but because of the time change, because of the way you have to travel is a little different, you're always going to try to do things to make sure that you're doing it the right way, that your players are prepared on time the game day comes, as far as sleep and the layover and things like that. But you want to keep those to yourself if you can.
Yeah. With the 5-2 start, just an overview, what do you think of the squad so far?
Well, I think, Coach Zimmer's done an outstanding job leading this team. I know we've had some injuries, but I think going through what we did last year, experiencing some of that, the team has shown resiliency. We have a lot of young guys that have stepped up, guys that if we do get a guy hurt or another guy hurt, coaches have done a great job getting their backups and some of these young guys prepared to play.
Speaking of backups, in your quest to find one this offseason at the quarterback spot, how did you settle on Case Keenum? Because, clearly it's worked out well so far, and he's been needed.
Case has always, ever since college, has had a lot of success. And as you go through, and we were going through and didn't know where Teddy was going to be, we wanted to make sure we had enough depth at that position. And we just went through our normal procedures, like we do for every position, whether it's a center, whether it's a defensive back, whether it's a defensive lineman. We conduct our free agency meetings just like we do the draft. And once we got through that period, and we started talking to Case's agent actually when we were down at the owners' meetings, and we're able to get that done, and we got him signed right after we got back from there. So you're always trying to find quality depth, and we felt that after our film evaluation and talking with Pat and them doing their film evaluation, that Case was a great option for us.
Speaking of depth, you look at running back, and unfortunately you see Dalvin Cook go down, and McKinnon and Murray step in, and we're running the ball great right now. Talk about in the offseason when you put a plan together to improve the running game or whatever, and it's Murray and it's Reef and it's Remmers and we're going to do it this way. But then Dalvin Cook, out of nowhere, becomes available for you in the draft, and you do what it takes to get him. And then maybe you shift something or maybe you don't. But talk about being flexible in the offseason and equipping the roster to handle any sort of sudden change that can happen during the season.
Well, you always go in, with a plan A, but it always doesn't happen that way. There are things that are always changing. It's constantly changing on a daily basis, especially when free agency starts. We knew we wanted to attack the offensive line, and what you're doing is you're comparing maybe the depth or the quality of a position out in free agency, and then comparing it to what the depth and quality is going to be in the draft. So that's how you kind of determine, well, we better attack it in free agency because it may not be as deep in the draft, or, hey, let's hold our horses here and let's not attack this in free agency, and we can do this in the draft and get our depth here in the draft or get a player here in the draft. So, but you always got to be flexible. That's why you go through the same processes every year. You go through the same systematic approach. Even though it may be a guy you don't think you'll ever get, you never know. I mean, even back to the Bradford trade, why are we sitting here, one of my younger scouts, why are we sitting here and evaluating Sam Bradford? Well, I don't know if we're ever going to trade for him. So you always got to be prepared, and that's why we try to do it very lethargic, a very in-depth, detailed way. So when something does come, something you don't expect, you're prepared and ready to go with it.
This quarterback Kyle Sloter, whose case is back up now, what led you to him? And paying many pounds to get him on your practice squad at one point. Now he's on the active roster as the backup.
Yes, and it seems you have had many pounds since you've been here.
Why would you say something like that? I mean,
the change in your pocket.
You're chiseled and you look great, and you have everything, and I have nothing, and you rip my weight.
No, I was talking about the money in your
That's
pocket
great.
that you're going to pay me for doing this damn thing in my nap time.
Well, you paid Kyle Sloter.
You don't take naps.
You paid Kyle Sloter a lot of money to join the team. What'd you like about him?
Well, he kind of, during the process in preseason, we evaluate every team. We evaluate top 15 to 20 guys that may come available. Evaluate guys that we may not know anything about. Well, who in the heck is this kid? Let's make sure we take a look at him. And it's not by position or by potential need. It's everything in every position. And he had a great preseason for Denver. I know he was a receiver down at Southern Miss and kind of had a different way. Wasn't even a starter at the beginning of the season.
Last year.
Yeah. And then their starter got hurt out in northern Colorado. And he came in and got his opportunity and took advantage. Wasn't in any big major all-star games or anything like that. Didn't see him at a bowl game. Didn't see him at the combine. One of our scouts saw him at a pro day at Colorado. And so we just kind of monitor him just like we do a lot of players.
Yeah.
How do you after the New Orleans game, the Vikings are Super Bowl contenders, and then Sam Bradford gets hurt, and it's Case Keenum when you lose in Pittsburgh, and now you're going to have a top 5 pick. And then you go on a winning streak, and you go to London, and you're division leaders. Like, for you, because it means so much to you, managing the ups and downs emotionally for you day to day, is that a challenge?
You don't pay attention to it. You know what you have to do this week, and we have Cleveland this week, and it's going to be a very tough match, and we've got to get prepared. You got to get prepared to play every week, and like I said, Coach Zim is making sure that this team handles everything on a week-to-week basis. And you go up and you go down. You know you're going to hit adversity during the season, and you just hold your ground and let all the talking heads out there, Wabi and PA,
right,
talk about what they see. Well, we're not good enough, or are we good or not? But you just go and work every week and then try to get prepared week in and week out.
I know into the draft you liked a lot of the rookie tight ends. This Kane, David Njoku for the Browns. What did you think of him coming out of Miami?
He's under contract with Cleveland, so I'm not going to talk about any players on another team.
Rick Spielman, general manager for the Minnesota Vikings from London.
What was it like? You guys had obviously, you talked about having a plan in place and a plan A and all that. The off-season signings or training camp signings of some of the guys on defense, that was, you guys obviously had a plan in place with those guys, and you've been very intentional.
Talking about re-signing our players?
Our guys,
okay.
Yeah. Linval and Xavier and Everson. Talk about, what it's like looking because you talked about week to week when you're in the season, but when you're in the off-season, you're planning for many seasons down the road. Talk about what that process was like and who you're working with on our staff to get that
Well,
done.
that's, myself and Rob Brzezinski and George Payton, and we're sitting there and we're evaluating where our cap's going to be 2 years from now, who's coming up on our roster, potentially what the market's going to be for that player. So you're always looking in advance, 2 or 3 years in advance, knowing what's going to come up. This year, our business principle has always been to do a guy a year out. But because we have some guys that were coming up at the same time, you want to try to stagger that. So we try to identify those guys that we knew were good football players for us that we want to finish as Minnesota Vikings. So we kind of broke away from our business principle and did those guys, even though they had 2 years left on their contract, to make sure that they were extended. by doing that, we were able to eat some cap space this year, get them locked under, and it's going to give us a lot of flexibility going into next year with some of the other players coming up.
With the offseason focus, last one from me, you put into the offensive line. Are you happy with the way it's performed so far?
Yeah, I think, Tony Sperano has done an outstanding job with those guys. It's a bunch of new faces, a whole new group of guys. They seem to have gelled together, working well together. And I think, especially up front on the offensive line, I've always said those guys have to work as one. And if you can get 5 guys working on the same page, you can't have 5 all-stars that aren't going to work together. So that's gelled over the training camp. I know people were a little nervous about it in preseason, but that's part of the process of getting these guys to go. And then if guys got hurt or a guy goes out, then we think we have enough depth with some of the guys we currently have on our roster to just step in and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
When you were climbing the ladder, up the ranks as a scout, who were some of your mentors, or who was someone who was really important to you with another team, or someone that maybe you looked up to, or someone who provided inspiration for you?
I probably, when I got started, I started out with Detroit, and I worked with Kevin Colbert.
Yeah.
Thomas Dimitrov worked with me. We came up through Ron Hughes, who is retired now. I got a opportunity to move up and work in Chicago under Mark Hatley, who has since passed away. But you also talk to a lot of people, a lot of the older guys. I remember sitting there as a young scout and talking to a Ron Wolf or talking to a Bill Polian. And just asking them different things. And then when you get the opportunity to potentially run, your organization, that you take little bits and pieces that you learn. And to me, you always have to continue to educate yourself. And till today, that's why I wanted to go to Arsenal. Maybe there's something they're doing that can give us a competitive advantage. Or I talk to my peers all the time, and maybe it's just one little thing they say that maybe can help us even improve. But you always got to look forward to continue to educate, and we try to tweak something every year in our process to make it more efficient, to make us better at what we do. And when you don't do that, you think you can improve. That's when you end up failing.
It's always a pleasure to be on the radio with Rick Spielman.
Even in London?
Absolutely. You're a worldly general manager. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Rick Spielman, general manager for the Minnesota Vikings. Back after this.